Hey everybody, welcome to our 01 September 2020 science session video. Remember this video we're watching together, it's going to be posted to Google Classroom in week 2 immediately following our Zoom session today. Today's agenda, pup of the day, a fast review from last week. Number 3, notes on variables. That will be in our science notebook. Number 4, we will discuss our period of a pendulum activity. Then we will be back to live Zoom for any questions. Hey, there's our pup of the day. I just wanted to look at a dog on a bike. And I just thought that was really neat. I don't know what his name might be. What do you think? I'm thinking like Sir Peddlesworth III from Tussex. Okay, here is a fast review from last week. You do not need to write this down. If you did not have a science notebook, but you do now, you can go back to our August 27th science session video and get this stuff in your notebook. But for this, we're going to just do a fast review. Okay, biotic. Remember, bio means life. So a biotic is something in the ecosystem or environment that's living. Mosquitoes, moose, you, bacteria, all kinds of things, as long as it's alive. Abiotic. So this is a factor in the ecosystem or environment that is not living. Temperature, elevation, water, an avalanche. I don't know why I thought of that today, but I did. And you know, if you're a person, that's an abiotic factor that could seriously impact you. Another review of our basics of data collection and making our data tables. Remember, the first thing you want to do is you just want to brainstorm what types of information am I going to want to write down and record. Data tables, they need a title. The headings, so right here, the headings show the reader what all these numbers mean down here. And if it's appropriate, if it has units, you put units in parentheses. And we'll be making more data tables today and this week. Okay, I am going to hit pause so you have time to write this down. So starting here at the word variable, you're going to write that down. You are going to write these words down right here, white, red, or blue light, what's best for plant growth, and write the examples down, and then we will reconvene in just a second. So I'll hit pause and get this slide down in your science notebook. Okay, if you did not have a science notebook, get it on a piece of paper and you can tape it or staple it into your science notebook when you get it. So a variable, they're things that can change in an experiment. They can change. Doesn't mean they have to, but they can. So let's think of a classic plant experiment. Let's pretend these are spinach plants. And we want to see what happens to plant growth when we put a plant under white, red, and blue light, just like in this picture. And we're going to run an experiment, see which one grows the most. So think of all the things that could change in this experiment. The color of the light, air temperature could change, the amount of water, some other stuff could be like the type of soil, the humidity, things like that. So we're going to go to our next slide. This will be in your science notebook again. I will pause the video, take about 30 seconds or so, and get this in your notebook. Okay, independent variable. It's changed on purpose by the scientist. It also is called the manipulated variable. So, for this experiment, what is the scientist, or you, let's pretend you're doing this, what are you changing on purpose? Well, it's the color of light. So we've changed that on purpose. That's called the independent variable. So now we are to our next slide. This goes in your science notebook. We'll hit pause, get this down, and then we will discuss it. Okay, hopefully you have that down in your science notebook or at least on a piece of paper. Dependent variable. An easy way to think about this and identify it, this is what you measure or you write down. This is your data. This variable depends on something else. So look at the example down here that you wrote down. What are we trying to measure in this experiment with the white, red, and blue light? We are measuring and recording, writing down the plant growth. Now, does the plant grow better or worse? We don't know until we conduct the experiment. But what we're going to do is say this sentence. Plant growth depends on blank. For ours, we're going to say the color of light. Now, we don't know if that's true or not yet, but if we were going to conduct the experiment, we would see. So, because plant growth depends on something else, it's our dependent variable. Okay, we will hit pause on this control variable, get this in your science notebook, and then we will discuss. All right, a control variable, and there's always going to be many of these. This is something you try to keep constant. So you want to keep it from changing. Constant means it's not changing. So back to our experiment. If we are changing the color of light on purpose, we are measuring plant growth. All the other variables we want to keep constant. So we want to keep the temperature in this room where our plants are the same for all plants. The humidity, we want to keep that the same for all plants. Soil source, we want to use soil for all of these plants from the same bag of soil that we got from Home Depot, let's say. We are keeping these variables controlled. We only want to change one thing on purpose in the experiment, if it's possible. This can be really hard to do in science. The great thing about plant experiments is you can control a lot of these variables. Now, sometimes you can't control them all, especially if you're out in nature. And that can mean your results aren't 100% accurate. And that is part of science. It's not going to go perfect, and you have to recognize those things and do the best you can and repeat the process. Okay, that's the end of our required writing in the science notebook. So now I just want you to sit back and kind of listen. If you want to go back to these slides back in the video later today or tomorrow and write this stuff down, you certainly can. But for right now, I just want you to watch and listen. So what is a period of a pendulum, and what are the variables? A pendulum, it's really easy, guys and gals. It's a mass suspended by a string, a rope, a chain, and it swings back and forth. That's all a pendulum is. You've been playing with these your whole life and you haven't even realized it probably. So if you look down here, a bob, that's what your object is. And then you have a length of string and you can suspend it from anything. Okay. Now let's look at what is a period. Well, think about school. If you went to fourth period, it's a certain amount of time. The period for a pendulum is a down and back swing. And we'll look at this here in just a minute. Okay, I will hit pause on this. This is an example data table. I'll show you some more of these in just a second. But if you want to get this down so you have something to go off of here when you do this in the next couple of days, you certainly can. So we'll hit pause and you can get this down in your science notebook if it's going to help you out. Okay, so just a reminder, in this example data table, you want a title, you want your headings, your units, you're going to want in parentheses. Everybody is going to have this column right here, time in seconds. Everybody will be recording that. Your independent variable, you get to choose that. Okay, We'll come to this slide in a second. I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you some examples of pendulums. We'll look at that last slide, and then we'll be back live. Okay, we are back. So I'm going to show you two pendulums and things you can do to give you an idea. Here's a pendulum. I just taped a ruler on a desk, made a length of string, and I just put this little cup that's for growing plants right here so I can put pennies in it. So what are some variables here? Length of string, the mass of our bob, what about our release point, where we release it from? My independent variable for this one is going to be mass. I don't have a scale at home, so I can't really know how many grams this is. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use 10 pennies. Okay, that's my independent variable. I'm changing that on purpose. I'm going to measure time. I put this fan here so that I release this from the same spot every single time. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a stopwatch on my phone. This takes practice, so you'll have to get the hang of it. So I start my clock in 3, 2, 1. Start, stop. Write that down. I want to do this 3 times at least. Start, stop. Write it down. Start, stop. Write it down. Then I'm going to increase my mass by 10 more pennies. I'll do that 3 times. Write it down. I'm going to increase my mass again. 10 more pennies. Release it from the same spot. And I'll do that 3 times and write it down. So I'll end up with something kind of like this. And I didn't have room to put a title on here. So you can see I got 10 pennies, 20 pennies, 30 pennies 3 times. That's my mass. That's my independent variable, changing it on purpose. Dependent variable is time in seconds. Now I'll take you over and show you another one. Okay, let's take a look at another thing we could do. So this time my independent variable will be length of string. That's the only thing I want to manipulate or change. So I have a string here and I tied 3 loops on it, and I tried to make them the same distance apart. This right here is just so you can see where my release point is. I want to release this from the same spot every time. So I got my stopwatch or my phone. Start. Stop. Write it down. Start. Stop. Write it down. I'm going to do that at least 3 times. Now, I'm going to go to my next length. Up here. I release it from the same spot. I picked this so it's easy to see for you. I got it right over my pink object for my release point. Stopwatch. Start. Stop. Do that 3 times. Write it down. And then I move up to here and I'll do it again. Release it from the same spot and time it at least 3 times. So let's take a look at this data table. Look something like this. Length of string, independent variable. I increased it by 25 centimeters each time. Record time in seconds. Okay, this is all in your Google Classroom assignment when you get into your classroom. 1. Create a pendulum at home. 2. List all the variables you could think of in your science notebook. 3. Use that list and pick one variable to manipulate or change. That's your independent variable. Time is your dependent variable. You're going to see if changing that variable affects the time it takes your pendulum to swing down and back 1 time. That's your time trial. Make a data table and record it in your science notebook. And then finally, for your points, complete the survey form in your period of a pendulum assignment in Google Classroom. Now we go back live.